That's what I'm talking about, son. Get you some of that daggone pie.
Woo-hoo! Looky there. There's your bug-eyed big one right there.
Getting started. We're getting started.
Here's what I'm talking about. Gosh dang gorilla.
Let's go, baby. Straight meat. God, look at that biggin.
All right, everybody, welcome into the show. I'm Big Ed, your host, and this is the BAM Pod. And on the line tonight, we have got a guy who's a tournament angler. He's been a guide for the fish we're going to be talking about, which is smallmouth. And he's been doing it on a premier lake in the state of California, Mr. Mark Pilgrim. Welcome into the show, man. Really appreciate you coming on.
Well, you know what? Thanks for having me. I've been wanting to jump on here for a while, and I love the show, and super excited to be here tonight.
Cool. That's what I want to hear. Some excitement on this deal. You know, we talked earlier, and we wanted to kind of talk about, you know, we've been doing, I think the last 3 shows have been on just wintertime fishing, you know, but that's what we're looking at right now. Is it's wintertime, and it's, you know, it's cold out there. It's going to get colder. You know, you're up the Chester area, which is up by Lake Almanor, which is, you know, pretty much Northern California. And you're at a good elevation where you're gonna get snow, you know. So you're just now getting ready to get into that. So we'll start talking about wintertime, some smallmouth, and what wintertime fishing is like up there. But you know, I kind of want to talk, you know, the transitions of spring and summer and fall, and how to kind of find smallmouth, because I think they're one of those fish that so many people love to go fish for, because they're such an active, such a fish of, I guess, lore. You know, people just think of smallmouth and they go, "Oh my gosh, I love to go smallmouth fishing." You know, and that's how it works. So let's start off right there. You know, with what you know, it's wintertime right now. We're going to be going into spring, summer, fall, all that coming up in you know, this year. What's your favorite way to kind of start fishing for these fish? You know, looking at, I guess we'll start right now with, you know, with wintertime. What is it that really gets you going when you think of smallmouth fishing right now?
You know, it's you're right. You know, with you know, being January and working on coming into February, it's cold up there, and it starts to snow, and you know, and it's hurtful to me to not be able to get out on the water as much as I'd like to, you know, this time of year. But you know, looking forward to the spring, and even, you know, early spring, like that March to April, when that water starts to warm up a little bit and ice comes off the water. It's a phenomenal fishery, and you know, we're just waiting for that water to warm up where it gets, you know, closer to 45, 50 degrees, and it generally happens. You know, we get that ice that finally melts if we do get ice in early March. Just looking for those fish starting to move around, and you know, throwing rip baits, and you know, there's so many different ways to catch smallmouth in that lake, and you know, it's not like any other lake. It's really a lake that's tough to, you know, figure out. And I've talked to a lot of guys that fish, you know, the circuits, and you know, ask me questions and want to come and do guide trips. And it's really a finicky lake, but there are giant fish in there. And that early springtime, I think for me, is one of my favorite times.
Okay.
Those fish start to move up on those points in the shallows and get into those stumps. And it's just, man, it's a phenomenal fishery.
Well, let's, you know, if we're gonna break that down a little bit, but let's describe Lake Almanor. I mean, it's basically just a big bowl with one deeper side and one shallower side. Lots of flats, lots of rocks, it's a volcanic lake. Kind of explain it a little bit.
Yeah, it's a man-made lake. So we're about 4,500 feet in elevation. It's a man-made lake. It's you know, it's deep on one side, so you get down toward the dam, and you've got water depths, you know, in that 70 to 90 foot range, and then that whole northwest end, it's just it's a flooded meadow. So you've got really shallow water. The majority of it on that northwest side being, you know, less than 20 to 30 feet, and lots of stumps on that northwest side. And then when you get to the east side, you've got a lot more of that cobble rock, chunk rock. And then down by the dam, you've got a lot more of the big rock points, drop-offs, islands, and things of that nature where those springtime fish. I generally fish that south side of the lake early spring where those those bigger rocks and the islands are.
Okay.
It's a phenomenal fishery. If you can figure out those transitions, we've got a big runoff into that lake every year. Getting back to the wintertime, part of this, when we get a heavy winter up in the Lake Almanor Chester area, we've got an overflow channel that runs in on the north side of the lake, which generally in the springtime keeps that lake pretty cool. If we have a heavy snow, so we get runoff through that diversion channel until April or May, and it really changes the dynamics of that waterway and how it fishes. And if you have a really light winter, you get that spawn, the water warms up a little earlier in the year, and then if we get a big heavy snowpack, you definitely are 2 to 3 or maybe 4 weeks behind every year with the heavy snowpack. So you kind of have to play it out, like I said, it depends on the runoff and what the water temperatures are doing.
When I think about smallmouth in this time of year, and right now, I guess naturally you think, oh, it's wintertime, it's cold weather, it's going to get colder. These fish are deep. They're trying to get down and to the deepest parts they can, where they can just sit on the bottom. Is that how smallmouth are? I mean, I know largemouth are that way, where they just they get on the bottom, they don't want to move. They're not. Right now we're getting some really we're getting that midwinter summer. But for the most part, largemouth are moving down. Maybe they're sticking in the grass. How are smallmouth right now, wintertime? How are they how do they set up?
Right now they get into that dormant mode, and I'm sure we've all seen pictures of smallmouth, and they get, when they group up and they get into those really tight bundles, and they get down there, right, in that 30 to 40 feet, off those little ledges, and they just really don't move. They get down there where that water is 50 degrees, and they just they kind of hibernate. And once you find them, you can, if you catch one, you're going to catch 20 or 30 fish, right? And it's just pinpointing those little pods. And right now you could probably go out there and throw spoons and and really do good. It's just dealing with the weather and getting out there and doing it.
Yeah, that when I think of smallmouth fishing, I think that weather actually turns them on a little bit, gets them going, maybe moves them around. Is that accurate for colder water, or are they only like that during the summer when the water is in that mid 70s? I guess.
You know what? You can catch them. It really depends on the lake and where you are. If you're on that northwest side, those fish really roam around. They don't, there's not a lot of room for them up on that side to go find those little, offshore pockets where they can go sit in little pods. They generally cruise around. There's a lot of bait in that lake, so they generally, move around quite a bit. When you get into that southeast side where the water's a little bit deeper, they'll get out there on those little island flats. And they'll kind of stay on those flats, and and like I said, if you catch one fish, you're going to catch a lot, and you can catch really big ones in the middle of the winter time. They don't stop feeding. It's just it's just finding them.
God, I got some questions running through my head here, but I'm going to focus a little bit more here. As we transition, you kind of talked about that water warming up 45, 50. If I'm, smallmouth are pretty much everywhere across the country, maybe a little less in, the Floridas, the southern parts, but definitely up, up in the northern areas, there's a bigger smallmouth population and people are going to be fishing for those. as you were talking about, hey, that water starts to get 45, 50, 55 degrees, they start getting more active.
You know
How
what?
do you start seeing that transition? When do you start seeing that transition? I mean, month wise.
Generally, okay, I'll break it down a little bit
Sure.
more on weather and month by month. But so if we have a big snowfall year,
Mhm.
that snowmelt's going to come in, in April and start keeping that. The water's going to start coming up. You're going to get a lot of that inflow from the Feather River and that overflow channel, and it's going to keep it kind of cool. When you get to that 50 degrees on the north side, the that's when the fish really start getting aggressive. If we have a really really super light winter where we just get a lot of rain, we're talking maybe early March. You're going to see that water start to creep up into about the 50s.
Okay.
Last year we had the heavy snowpack, so it was a little bit later. We were like toward the end of March when we started getting that 50-degree water temperature and the fish started to get real active. It's kind of funny, when I kind of base it off the trout fishermen. You'll get a lot of guys up there that are trout fishermen, and all of a sudden one of them will be trolling out there and they'll hook a real big smallmouth, and you go, okay, now it's kind of game on. So it's my favorite month is April, but if we have a really really nice light winter, that late April to the first part of May, man, it's just phenomenal. When that water gets to about 50, 52, 53 degrees, really really good.
Okay, so what you're saying is book a trip with you for April and May.
Book a trip. Yeah, this year May might be a little difficult for me, seeing I might be off limits, but April's a great month. And even like I said in March, it's
Yeah.
it's those are phenomenal months. And for guys out there that haven't done a lot of rip bait fishing, it's to have a fish hit a rip bait, a 3 or 4 or even a 5-pound smallmouth, it's something that everybody needs to experience, and it's an absolute blast.
Well, and that was basically where I was going to go with that was, a couple things was, one, what is your favorite bait out there? And I'm guessing it's rip baits to throw out there, but do they work all year long?
You
And
can catch.
two, and two, really, what, you talked about some trout out there. So the question that I had right after that, just the second one I want you to answer is, do you ever throw big swim baits up there for those fish? And will they eat them?
You know what? They will eat big swim baits. You know what? Like I said, I'll get to your first question.
Sure.
You could throw rip baits all year. When you get into pre-spawn and those fish get really active, it's a rip bait bite for about a month. It could go into 6 weeks before those fish come up on beds where that rip bait bite really just gets just phenomenal. And then they'll when those fish are spawning mid March through, it could go all the way into mid May. And as soon as they come off beds there, those big females start to feed. You can catch them on rip baits all the way through until mid June. And in that transition, it'll slow down in the summertime, and then you hit that fall and the rip bait bite will start again. And then getting back to the swim baits, you'd be surprised what those smallmouth will eat. And I throw a lot of 7-inch swim baits, and there's a swim bait that I throw on Shasta and Orville, and I throw that same swim bait up there, and those smallmouth they'll annihilate that thing. So yeah, I mean, don't be afraid to throw out a big bait and have a fish come up and grab that thing. They definitely work.
I will give you the option to keep that bait a secret, but if you'd like to share it, there's probably people wanting to know what it is.
Hi, this is Josh McMurray. I'm the city manager for the city of Oakley. We're located on the Delta. We have a beautiful shoreline, and we really want to promote the city as the gateway to the Delta and showcase everything that we have to offer. We have a beautiful downtown that's expanding, brand new restaurants, What we're trying to do is build that brand to make sure that people know that you can come to Oakley and you can do everything that you want associated with the Delta, and you can still stay here, eat here, and have a good time in a very family-friendly and safe environment.
You know what? I'll throw that one out though. So it's a Shasta swim bait. I throw it in a German brown pattern, and it's you know, it works. You know, like I said, that north side of the lake, there's a lot of stumps up there, and you drag that thing across the top of those stumps, and it's pretty amazing, you know, to watch a 5-pound smallie come up and grab a bait that's that big. And I've had, you know, multiple fish come up and try and grab it at the same time. You know, it's you know, kind of a great bait to throw up there. Yeah, and then it's, you know, I throw out so many different things. You know, it's a huge topwater lake too. You know, the topwater part of that is, you know, I throw topwater in that lake year round. And you know, a lot of guys always, you know, they're into that fall transition time, like topwater time, and a lot of guys call me and say, "Hey, is it topwater time yet?" And you know, really on Almanor, it's topwater time, you know, all year. So, you know, you can catch fish there from April all the way through end of October, and I've caught them into November on topwater. And you know, it's one of those fisheries that's a little bit different. You know, it's not like going to Trinity where you have certain lakes like Trinity and the Columbia River that kind of fish like largemouth lakes. You know, you can throw out a big swim bait, you know, or a Kitech or, you know, swim bait fish for largemouth and catch smallies in Trinity and the Columbia River. At Almanor, it's a little different. You know, the fish are a little more finicky. They generally don't respond to those largemouth baits, but there's definitely a few of them that they will eat.
Okay. You know, when you're talking about topwater all year long up there, is that because it's a smallmouth predominant lake, or is it just because those fish in there will eat it?
Just because they'll eat it. You know, it's funny. I've got a couple of areas that I fish over and over and over again, and you know, I can go into an area with a client and, you know, fish a wall and catch 15 topwater fish, you know, in a day, and go back the next day and take another client through the same area and, you know, and catch another 15. And you would think there's a lot of fish that have distinctive, you know, markings, colorings, you know,
right.
You know, you know the fish that you're catching. And I really don't think I catch, you know, many fish, you know, day in and day out that are the same fish. So there's just a lot of fish in certain areas in that lake. And you know, and like I said, I think it could have something to do with the, you know, the rainbows that are in certain areas. There is areas where there's grass, so you'll have a lot of rainbows, German browns that are mixed in with the smallmouth, and they really get aggressive when you get into those areas where, you know, where they're fighting over bait.
All right, that's good. So look for some of that area if you really want to focus on it. And I can't tell, you know, it's one of those things. If you want to go out and catch some of these fish and really know what he's talking about, gosh, by all means, book a trip with him. But you know, this is what he's talking about, or what we're talking about here is that looking for smallmouth, because this lake does have largemouth in it, but for the most part, you're not focusing on those much at all when you're out there, or are you?
You know, it's funny. So we're gonna take it back a little ways to my days of growing up there, and you know what, I've always been a trout guy. I was always a trout guy when I was a kid. My dad used to take me out, and you know, we'd troll around, and he always used to tell me about these big smallmouth that were in the lake. So, you know, when I always was like, it was my goal and my focus to figure out the smallmouth, you know, and I really never went out there looking for largemouth. You know, I knew that there was largemouth, and every now and then somebody would catch one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I never went out and just focused on trying to, you know, to catch 5 in a day, because it's just, you know, they're elusive in that lake, and they're hard to catch. And unless you know exactly where you're going and where they are, you know, you could waste a week up there and not ever get a bite. You know, I know that there's anglers that go up there, and I believe that there was a tournament there 2 years ago where an angler brought in a couple of largemouth, and you know, they are there. I actually made it a goal to myself 2 years ago to just go out and see if I could catch 5 in a day. You know, I knew they were there, and I've always wanted to really, you know, push myself to do it. So, you know, I know that lake in and out, and I to this day I have not had a 5-fish limit. You know, a bag of 5 fish in that lake of largemouth, and I've gone out and caught 2 or 3 in a day, and I've caught some big ones. I've caught some, you know, 8-9 pounders. But I don't want to discourage people from going out and doing it. But I don't want people to be disappointed, you know, if they're going to go up there and try and do it, because it's, you know, the likelihood that you're going to catch one is not good.
All right. Well, I mean, then that's a good thing that we're talking about smallmouth then. You know, so we've kind of talked about winter a little bit. We've talked about spring. Let's break down summer a little bit, because you know, I think summertime is probably the one time when most people want to go out fishing. It's, you know, hey, it's warm out, you get out, you know, and at your elevation, you're just under 5,000, right? Is that right? Or are you just over 5,000?
Yeah, 4,500.
Okay. So you've got, it's cooler up there than, you know, everywhere else. The valley, you'll be at 110, and you're at 109 or 98. You know, something like that. You're in a beautiful setting up there. The lake is absolutely, if you're listening to this show right now and you've never seen Lake Almanor, by all means, book your family a trip up there and go, because it is a magnificent lake to go to. It is absolutely gorgeous. The town of Chester and all the towns around it are beautiful to be there. Even after the fires, they're still gorgeous. Just drove through there this year. Still beautiful up there. But summertime is that time when I think a lot of people love to go fishing. So let's talk about what it is that, you know, you talked about rip baits all year, that sort of thing. But what do you do in the summer that just, you know what, summer comes on and these fish are what?
Wow, you know, this is the one that I kind of wanted to skirt around, but no, I'll throw it out there. I know a lot of guys that are fishing the Pro Tour this year are going to want some information on. They're going to be listening to this. So, but
okay, so if if you're listening to this right now, what you're about to hear is wrong. Oh, go ahead.
Exactly. You know, that summertime is absolutely my favorite time to fish there. Spring is great. Summer's, you know, always a great time up there. You can always go out there and catch fish. You know, the spawns generally happens there, like I said, from, you know, that March to April. You can still kind of get on some spawning fish in late June, but you get that transition right about June 1st. So we have a big hex hatch on that lake, and it generally happens right around the middle of June. So that is really the big transition for that water.
Father's Day. Father's Day, right?
Yeah,
Isn't that kind of the big one?
I base it on Father's Day every year. My birthday and Father's Day actually fall right around the same day. So I always work it right around that time. So that's the big transition time for me. So as soon as we get to that mid-June, I generally go back to my reaction, which we were talking about throwing rip baits. That's when I'm going to move over and start throwing spinner baits, and you know, something a little more flashy. You know, baits that are going to grab that fish's attention. That's going to happen from, you know, like I said, that mid-June into July, end of July, and at the same time I'm throwing top water, and you know, it's kind of a weird transition depending on where you are and the weather. You know, we always get a late storm up there. It seems like Memorial Weekend, it always snows, you know, at Chester Lake Almanor. So just when you think that you have the perfect thing set up in that transition, right when you're getting ready to move into the new, you know, into this new transition phase, the weather completely messes things up and changes things around. So, I'll generally, that's when I use my electronics. You have to really have forward facing sonar to be able to do well on that lake in midsummer. It's the fish are really spread out. You'll get groups of fish that sit on those stumps. They'll get in those stumps, and the stumps that are in that lake they've got massive root systems. And you may have a winning bag of fish. You could have 25 pounds of smallmouth under one stump. Oh. And they'll hang out under one stump in 7-8 feet of water, and without forward facing sonar, if you don't know those fish are there, you might throw something across the top of there, or a spinnerbait or something, and have a fish chase and they don't bite, and the angler will keep moving. And you could sit on that stump for 15-20 minutes with forward facing sonar and pluck every fish out from underneath that thing. And you could drag a spinnerbait through there, or First Gen Fishing makes a top spin, which I love, and you could throw those out and drag it right through the stump. They really don't hang up. They will hang up, but they're not going to hang up as much as a traditional spinnerbait. Okay. So you could drag those through there, and I really pick the stumps apart in midsummer. That's generally where the fish. There's no shade out there, so the fish that are looking for shade, they get their shade from those stumps.
All right. I mean, that's a pretty wide open lake, and there's somewhat floating docks out there in a couple places, but other than that, like you said, the stumps and everything, that's mostly where they're shaded. Let's see here. So we went through summer, broke that down.
Yeah, and you know what? I could rattle on for a while about that.
No, that's okay. I mean, let's let some of those guys go out there and figure out their own fish. Let's take that up. But then you start into fall, and smallmouth they're a roaming fish. And I mean, is it, when you look at that kind of, being a river fish, I guess, do you look in the same places on that lake? Because I mean, everything you've kind of described is around those stumps, is around the big rod, it's around. Are they moving about in the fall a little bit more? Because everything you've talked about, and maybe I should break that down first, is everything you've talked about has all been fish imitations. What is the bait that's in that lake that are they only chasing fish? Are they eating crawdads? Are they eating, I know there's goby in there. Do they eat those? I mean, what is it that is there any time, I guess, or what is it that they're looking to eat at, these times of year, the summer and in the fall? I mean, I've heard spinnerbaits and that sort of thing, but even that's all spinnerbaits and rip baits, mainly some swim baits. That's all fish. Are they not eating some of the other stuff in there?
Yeah, you know what? There is gobies in there, and it's funny because I really haven't used much in the goby bait. Any kind of that kind of presentation up there. I really haven't thrown a lot of them, but they do work up there, and there was a lot of gobies in that lake. Crawdads, probably the number one source of protein for those fish. I mean, there's a lot of crawdads in there, and that's if you can find those areas, and that north, like I said, the northwest side is they tend to be a little bit bigger. You get on that southeast side, the crawdads tend to be a little bit smaller. The other bait fish in there is that Wakasagi smelt. It's the same Wakasagi smelt that are in, I believe, in Oroville. In fact, I think those fish actually came from Almanor and ended up in Oroville. Yeah, exactly the same bait fish. So if you figured out a bait that's working in Oroville, odds are it's going to work in Almanor. And I throw a lot of those rip baits that mimic that Wakasagi pattern. And there's some smaller, they do a lot of planting in there too. There's a lot of rainbows that are planted in that lake every year, and they will congregate around those areas where they plant those fish and eat those smaller rainbows also. Okay.
And that's just what I look at now. If if you're trying to go around that a little bit, I'll let you. The whole crawdad pattern, looking and that sort of thing, and what you're looking for up there. But it just seems to me the lake that has, so many stumps and so many rocks and that sort of thing, that would be such an important pattern. But it doesn't seem like that's the one you want to go with. You're more into that smelt. And when you talk about Oroville, and that's where those fish came, some of those smelt came from. Are there spotted bass in that lake also, or no?
You know what? There isn't. There could be. I've never seen one caught there. I would say 99% of the fish in that lake are smallmouth. And like I said, you have a small, population of largemouth. If I'm going out there, like I said, it's generally just fishing smallmouth. And I do throw crawdads. I throw a lot of crawdad baits. There's Bill Lewis makes a couple of great baits that are crawdad patterns that I throw. In the middle of the summertime, late fall, I'll throw square bills out there and catch fish on those. And up north, I throw those square bills all the time. The crawdad pattern square bills and catch fish up there. The LV 500s work, in that crawdad pattern. Jigs work great on that lake, but you really gotta downsize. You really, really have to make come up with a jig or a pattern that's small. Definitely that finesse crawdad pattern will produce way more fish than fishing like a big 3/4 ounce jig.
Tackle Warehouse has been the premier online tackle shop since 2003, with a huge selection of not only the latest and greatest from the biggest brands, but the hard-to-find regional specialties as well. Tackle Warehouse. Click, save, fish.
Okay. We've got we got about a half hour, maybe 15, 25 minutes or so left on the show. And I want to pivot a little bit and talk to you about this upcoming year. I know you've already mentioned there's one tournament up on the BAM, the BAM tour is going to be up there on Almanor. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what you're going to be fishing this year, and how this year's going to break down for you and the different areas you are fishing.
Yeah, this is actually going to be a kind of a crazy year for me. It's I planned on fishing, a couple of different things, and then it kind of changed for me a month ago. I decided to go in a different direction and do some different stuff. So it sounds like I'll be fishing a couple of the WAN bass events, which I'm actually down in Anderson right now. I've pre-fished the last couple of days, getting ready for the WAN Bass Open, which starts tomorrow on Lake Shasta, and then I'll probably fish the WAN Bass at Clear Lake. I think it might be in March or April. I'm not sure when that is. And then we kind of transition into the new BAM series. So I'll be fishing the BAM Pro Ams. First one starting, I believe, in February here on Lake Shasta. And then those kind of bounce around different foothill lakes here, in California. And then and then definitely I'll be fishing the BAM Pro Tour this year. So that's really gonna put some miles on the vehicle, and yeah, I think it's gonna be fun. I think it kind of fits right in my wheelhouse. We have our first event in April, first week in April down at Lake Martinez, which I have not fished. That's down just north of Yuma. And I've never been on that water, lower Colorado River. And I fished a lot in the Colorado River, but I've never fished that lower, part of the river. And I think that's going to be a blast, to get down there and catch some of those real big largemouth. And then we transition, go right into a smallmouth up at Almanor. And it's going to be tough for me because I am a guide there, and I'm not going to be off limits for 30 days, not be able to fish there in May. But in the end, I think it'll be worth it. I'm super excited to be able to fish that water and fish the whole series, and just bounce around and do some different stuff. And it is going to be a hectic year for me, but I'm up to the challenge for sure, and I'm really excited for this year, and I just can't wait to get rolling here.
Yeah, you fished and you were a part of the Western bass whole incidents and all that stuff that kind of went on with that whole thing. And you fished. Did you fish Western? How long did you fish Western bass for? All the years it was here?
I fished Wild West
Or
for
Wild
I
West?
think
Sorry.
yeah, I fished Wild West for 3 or 4 years, and I liked fishing that. It was it was a great circuit while it lasted. I don't want to get too much into that. That's,
No,
I
not
mean,
at all.
kind of beat it,
I'm,
kind of beat a dead horse there. So
yeah,
but you know what,
no,
it was, yeah, I did fish that series, and I liked it, and I just think that what Mark Lassane's doing right now in the BAM series is just,
right.
he's opening so many doors for us on the West Coast, and I think he's really stepping into a position where he's gonna put anglers on a pedestal where I'm hoping we can pull in some more sponsorship, and get some bigger companies maybe from the Midwest and East Coast to go, hey, these guys on the West Coast deserve a shot to fish with the rest of the guys, and especially the guys out there. And there's so many great anglers here in the West that deserve that chance. And and I think that this new series is going to showcase a lot of these guys to be able to come out and be diverse and fish some great waters. And I think a lot of the guys too that have been on the fence, maybe like they wanted to come in and fish events with Wild West, but they felt intimidated maybe a little bit and didn't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys sitting at home that were maybe like, I'm comfortable fishing team events, but I really want to fish a pro event. This is the time. I mean, if you're gonna jump out there and get in a boat and go do this, why not do it from day one? I mean, we're
Right.
starting a new circuit here in the West, and this is a great opportunity for, thousands of anglers that are great anglers, maybe that fish the on the amateur side or the AAA side in Wild West.
Right.
Any other circuit, if you were fishing WAN or MLS, this is your opportunity to jump up and come join the group and and go have some fun.
Yeah, I think there, and I was going to ask you that is, and that's where I was going with the whole, with the whole, Wild West out here was, do you see, I feel like there was a lot of people that were intimidated by it, and not because of the anglers, because I don't, but because of the way it was. Maybe I shouldn't say the Wild West. Maybe I should say the Apex. I think the Apex was the one that really intimidated people. Like, oh, these are the best in the in the country. Whatever. Why am I going to go fish against those guys? But I think that's the one thing that Mark's really changing is that you're going up against probably still the same caliber of guys. But do you feel it's at that level where, yeah, you know what? I don't feel as intimidated to go fish against those guys because of the way that he's putting this on?
I kind of felt, even as an angler and as a professional, when you look at guys, in the past that were fishing Apex, there's a lot of guys in there that they're just amazing anglers. These guys can go anywhere and catch fish at any time, any conditions. It's incredible what these guys do. And as a professional, I felt a little bit intimidated, like looking at these guys going, man, I don't know if I can go do that. And I think this year, with what Mark's doing and the whole new series, and I think it's taken that pressure away from people, and it's definitely for me. I think when I got my invite to be able to do this, for some reason, I just didn't feel that pressure. I felt like, what, I'm going out there and I'm going to go out and hang out with, a bunch of my friends. These are guys that I fish with every weekend, or not every weekend, but every, at least once a month.
Yeah.
These are the guys that I'm with. And, whether it's, these 4 or 5 or, 6 guys that are, always in the top 10 fishing these events, or, any of the other guys in there, it's just the camaraderie and what we're doing in the West is it's an amazing thing, and the caliber and group of guys that we have. We're all like brothers. We had guys today that had boat issues, yesterday that had boat issues out here in Shasta, and these guys just, they take care of each other. There's there's not a guy out here that won't give you the shirt off their back. And I think that's the kind of circuit that you have to have, where I think a little bit with Wild West, that was a little more intimidating. And, maybe you wouldn't ask a question. Maybe you wouldn't go up to, a Ken Ma or,
Mm-hmm.
Nick Wood or, one of these guys and say, hey, you know what, ask them a question and, get a response. Let me tell you, these guys are the best of the best. And I wouldn't feel, as an amateur, if somebody's coming into this, you can walk up to any one of these guys and say, hey, I'm struggling on this lake. What can I do? I mean, these guys will tell you, where to go. They're going to tell you everything, but they're going to, they'll definitely let you know, what you can do to get on the water and go have some fun and catch some fish. I mean, and like I said, it's a great, I think it's a great group of guys. And it's a great circuit, and the way Mark's doing it is going to be, it's going to be something to watch. I think in the future, in the next couple of years, it's going to grow very quickly. And I've already seen, some tremendously, great things that Mark's done. And I can't wait. Like I said, I'm super excited to get rolling with it. And, it's really going to be fun.
Well, that's and that's what I really wanted to hear is guys are excited about it, and it's looking like this is going to be an event. We're going to try to make this thing as best we possibly can. And you left me one question in there that I'd really love to hear from an angler who's been doing this for a while, fished at kind of all the levels that you have. What is it that you think it's going to take for the West Coast to be, I don't know, I want to say recognized as well as Alabama? That you're they're going to say, the organization that just let me know what you think it is so we can go that way.
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer. There's a lot of there's a lot of stuff going on where we've had there's 3 or 4 different circuits on the West Coast where where there's guys that won't fish one event because they want to fish. They're kind of tied to different events that they want to fish. And last year when Wild West was here, there was guys that wouldn't fish one event because they were fishing a different event. And that was the main thing. It was, you got to get away from that narrow path where you're going to go down one trail and just fish. You have to be really diverse. And not only that, but you've really got to, I think everybody as a whole really needs to, just, expand what they're doing and be more open to, growing. And a lot of guys, I think now realize after, what happened last year that we need to go in another direction. And we have those big sponsors still. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there, Rick Pierce and a lot of those guys out, those big companies out east, or, they recognize the anglers in the West. And we need more companies like that. You definitely need those bigger companies that are supporting the anglers out here. And, the anglers are here. And I don't want to see a bunch of guys leave and go back, to the East Coast and, and lose those guys. Yeah. But getting back to your question, it's so hard to say, hey, this is what we need out West to be able to grow the anglers, because I don't know the answer to that. It's definitely getting those bigger companies to go, hey, we recognize these guys are great anglers, and we need to help them grow this in the West, as much as they're helping in the Midwest and in the East Coast. Right. It's it's just it's one of those things that we were trying to do over the last couple of years, and Wild West was trying to do that, and it just didn't go there. And I think this one, like I said, I think the BAM series with Mark is going to really blow up, and I think some of those bigger companies and those people from the Midwest and East Coast are going to jump in. I think we're starting to see it already. I'm seeing a lot of posts and comments being made where, man, it's happening. I mean, this circuit is going places, and it's going places quick. So I think that we're going to grow. I think that in the next couple of years, going to be pretty. It's going to be pretty awesome in the West, and and
Yeah.
to be able to do this, I think full time as an angler, it's going to take some time, and anybody that's fishing in the West is definitely got an addiction, because we're all not getting we're not getting paid to be out here, but we do have some good sponsors out here, and the guys that we do have that are helping us are great, and but yeah, like I said, it's just that's a question I can't answer directly, but I can't wait.
Well, it was a really tough question, and it was a really tough question. Yeah.
I know if it happens, I'm hopeful that I'm a part of that if it does blow up in the West, and I'm doing my part. Whatever I can do to help it grow, I'm here.
Tired of searching through ads to find bass articles in your favorite fishing magazine? Well, we have a solution for that. Introducing Bass Angler Magazine with over 30 articles in every issue, filled with tips and techniques to help you catch more fish. Follow the pros as they publish the most up-to-date seasonal methods to catching bigger bass. Whether you're a beginner or professional angler, make Bass Angler Magazine part of your gear today. Be a part of the fastest growing bass publication in the nation. Log on to bassanglermag.com with code TV and save 20% when you subscribe now.
And I think, honestly, that's the answer that most people should have, or the attitude most people should have is, you know what? I'm going to put all of my pettiness aside, my ego aside, and I'm going to do what's best for the sport. I'm going to do what's best for what's coming in, and whatever that takes, whether it is fishing multiple events, whether it's just, putting in some extra time, talking about it, posting on social media, growing it up and showing that there's support out here, because I believe, to me, when I look at it, that's always been the biggest issue, is there's the lack of support from the angler base. Not, I just talked to, was it 2 shows ago? We just talked to Boyd Duckett, and that was one of Boyd's things to tell us. He goes, listen to your anglers, because they're the ones who have to spend the money. They're the ones who have to push. So that's, I look forward to that, going into this year, is what the anglers have to say that they want to see, what they're willing to spend money on to come out, because that's the bottom line, is we're asking them to open up their pocketbooks and give us money so that we can create a sport out here in the West that they're happy to fish, they're happy to give their money, and they feel some confidence in. And if we can do that and get the anglers behind it, I feel like this will grow exponentially. And Mark, in my opinion, and in my opinion, he's a little jaded, but he's been doing what I think it's going to take. The guy doesn't stop working on this event. I mean, if you guys come out, you will see how hard he works. He works very hard. But he wants to have the West Coast blow up. And I think it can happen, but we need the anglers' support. That's probably been my answer for the most part. And just hearing you say that, was a huge to hear.
Yeah, you know what? And he has been, Mark's been so transparent on, on everything that he's put out there, and he's had a lot of questions. There's been a lot of anglers that are, in the beginning that were like, hey, why are you doing this? You can't do that. There's something else going on here. And, and he was, from day one, he's been honest, and that's what I love about it. It's just, if there's an issue, he addresses it, and there's nothing hidden. If you have a question, throw it out there. Mark's going to answer your question, and he did the survey when he was building the circuit, which I loved. He threw a survey out there to everybody and asked everybody what they wanted, and everyone, that was in answered those questions. And, he kind of built his profile of the circuit off of the anglers' responses. And, and I think that's the way it has to work. If you want something to succeed, build something that's going to succeed, not something that's destined to fail.
Good points. We've just sat here for the last 45 minutes listening to this guy, Mark Pilgrim, talk to us. Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are? Let's let everybody out there kind of know, who you are and and some of your sponsors and that sort of thing, and how they can follow you and get and watch you this year and see how well you do on the BAM tour.
Yeah. So first of all, let me just say, born and raised. I was born and raised in Chester. Both my wife and I were born up there. Eric, a lot of you guys out there know my wife. So anyway, born and raised in Chester. Went on to work for UPS for 28 years and retired from UPS and started my professional career for the second time. And then, I still live up there. So I guide up there generally from March 1st until the end of October. So if anyone wants to book a trip with me, you find me online. Mark E. Pilgrim is my Instagram, or Mark Pilgrim 148 on my Facebook. Get a hold of me up there anytime for a guide trip. And it's just been like I said, it's been a crazy couple of years, and I've been so fortunate to be able to live in Chester and Lake Almanor and be able to fish all these events and do the different things that I do. And I've got a lot of people to thank for it. I've had a couple of companies that have been with me for years. I had a few companies that were with me 15, 20 years ago when I was doing this on the team side. And, they're back with me, but I've really, really been lucky over the last 3 or 4 years that, to be able to pull in, my partnerships with my sponsors. And I thank them so much. I've got, First Gen Fishing, Beckman Nets, and P-Line. That company is just, has always stood behind me. I've had Big Bite Baits for a couple of years. One of my sponsors, they've been with me for 3 years. They were just acquired by GSM. So I just signed with GSM. I just signed with GSM this last week with Big Bites and also Bill Lewis. So I'm super excited to work with them again. Eternal Lithium Batteries. I've been with them for almost 3 years now, and they are actually partnered with Mark in the BAM series this year. So we're going to see some cool things, from them. I've got, Gets It Baits has been with me forever. Here I am, a smallmouth guy up in Almanor, so Gets It's been with me for a long time, and I grew up throwing, Gets It Baits. Mercury Marine I just signed with, so I'm super happy to have them on board. And one of my favorite, we're getting back to that small profile jig up at Almanor, Wicked Weights. Wicked Weights makes a super cool small profile jig that just works phenomenal. In fact, I was throwing it here this week, and got a couple of small companies up there too. The little places around Chester that help me out. Plymouth Pines Resort, which is the only resort on Lake Almanor that actually has a restaurant and boat launch that sit on the water. So that's generally been the place in the past where a lot of the tournaments are done. Super great place. Lake Almanor Boat and Storage is a huge help to me. Lake Almanor Ace Hardware and Diversified Resources. Just a couple of small companies, up there that really help me out. And, like I said, these companies have been with me for a while now, and I can't wait to jump into this year with them and see where it takes me. If there's anybody else out there that's looking, I am still looking for a boat sponsor.
Well, there you go. I mean, and if you're listening right now, remember when these guys tell you these sponsors, make sure that you actually, do some business with them if you can. If you're not already sponsored by somebody else, but do some business with them if you can, because honestly, that's what keeps our sport going, is the support that you guys show them. So they're supporting our sport, they're supporting these anglers. Go back, hit all these people up, order some product from them, stay at their places, however you can do it to help, and that's what you're really doing. Mark,
there's one other quick thing real quick too. And there's a company up there. We had a big fire 3 years ago and we lost one of our businesses, and that was Riley's Jerky, which was one of our local businesses, and they rebuilt right after the fire, got the business back up and running again, and they never stopped supporting me even when the building burned. and they've always been behind me. And I have to say a huge thank you to those guys and Kaylee, and I appreciate them, along with my family. Got to thank my mom, John, my brother, and everybody else. And yeah, it's overwhelming and heartwarming to have these people behind me.
That's awesome, man. Thanks for thanks for putting that out there. That those are stories that we need to know and need to hear. And I'm glad that there are companies out there that were able to rebuild, come back from those massive fires that we had up there. And honestly, Riley's is awesome jerky. So if you're out there, you want to get into it, that's a good company.
They ship national, and they've really grown in the last 5 years. It's all over the place.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've seen them in a few places. So but yeah, so we're pretty much at the end of the show. You got everything done. Thank you for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. Tons of knowledge. I know most of it's about Lake Almanor, but if you're listening locally, great. And if you're listening from all over the place, no reason why you shouldn't come visit California, Northern California. Give him a shout, book a trip, come see some of this beautiful water up here. I guarantee you, if you come up to Lake Almanor, you will not be disappointed. That place is absolutely gorgeous. Been going there for years myself, and you'll love it up there, right?
Yeah, if you guys want to book a trip, that's the best time to book. September, October. That topwater bite up there is absolutely off the hook. I mean, that's the time. If you guys want to catch your PB, smallmouth, those 2 months. You have a great opportunity of catching a 5-6 pound smallmouth. So those are that's that little window for you guys that are looking for for giants. And I'll throw out my cell phone number too. It's 530-249-3810. So anybody that wants to get a hold of me there, book a trip. I'd love to have you guys.
All right. Well, Mark, thanks for coming on the show, man. Really appreciate it. It was a wealth of knowledge. Couldn't ask for anything more, dude. I really, really appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us.
Yeah, no problem. I'm super, super excited about the year, and I'm so glad that you had me on. And sorry I had to, skirt around the Almanor springtime May thing a little bit there, but yeah, super excited to be here.
No, that's fine. And I'll tell you what, all you got to do, you go out and you win Almanor, and we'll have you back on, and we'll talk about how you did it. And then you can give all your secrets away, and it won't matter till the following year.
Okay, let's not jinx me on that one. That little old saying about the home lake, and I'm gonna stay away from that one.
I had a guy. What was his name? Randy something. I had him on, and then he flopped big time in his home lake. So
yeah, I'm hoping not to do that.
There you go. Well, hey, that's what it's all about, going out there. That's why they actually fish the events, right? Because otherwise they just wouldn't by living there.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right, man. Well, thanks again. And thanks for tuning in, everybody. We really appreciate it. Tune in next time. In a couple weeks, we will have another great angler just like this one. And I hope you get as much knowledge out of it. So thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.